title. So I think as you get further away from it, people won't remember it quite as much. People will remember it more for what Kawhi was able to do. And then we'll have to see what his career lends itself to going out. And that kind of takes me to the next question, Eric, because again, July 1st is creeping up. Kawhi went to Toronto. He didn't want to go there. He went there to finish out his contractual obligation. And now he's a free agent. The talk all along has been that he's going to find himself into a Clippers uniform, that they've had scouts and people at every single one of his games trying to show him that kind of love. Yeah, Doc Rivers get fined for comparing him to Michael Jordan. So that seemed to be the place that everyone thought that he was going. Now all of a sudden he's brought the Raptors a title. So how has that changed your mindset? Should he stay? Should he go? What do you think's going through Kawhi's head right now?
It hasn't changed my mind at all. I still think he goes. I'm still on the side that says he didn't originally want to be there, and he doesn't probably want to be there now. I mean, again, I can't take anything away from the guy for putting in 110% and delivering on his contract. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement for a guy that a year ago we were questioning his loyalty. We were questioning his attitude. We were questioning a lot about him, but he worked through this year and did the job that was set before him as a professional. So I do have to give him credit for that. But if he turns around and opts out of this contract and then ends up in a Clippers uniform or some other team, you know, whether it's Brooklyn or somebody with lots of money, however that ends up, someone even came out today and said the Lakers have a chance now if they got AD. I'm not so sure about that, but I don't know. You know, it comes down to, where does Kawhi want to live? You know, he's still a young guy. Where does he want to live? If he still wants to live, you know, San Antonio was, again, Kawhi's not known to be like a big happening out on the scene type of guy, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want warm climate or want to be out and about or just chilling in the sun. I don't know what he wants, and maybe Toronto doesn't provide that. Not to mention, it's a different country. I mean, no matter how you want to slice it, Canada and the U.S. are different countries. So maybe he just looks at that and says, I just want to live in the U.S. I want to live in L.A. I want to whatever. And so if he ends up in L.A., I mean, that's his right.
Well, furthermore, people saying that, look, he's a free agent. So people can't say that he didn't earn this. What he did last year, we didn't like. We took him to task on it last year for giving up on the Spurs and what he did, how he handled that situation. But he got traded. You didn't hear any complaining about it publicly. You didn't hear him saying he can't wait to get out of there. He went in, he made the most of the situation, and he won a freaking title in his first year there. So I think from a basketball only perspective, I don't see how he can go somewhere and find a better fit than what he's got in Toronto. Siakam is only going to get better. Toronto was willing to spend money. They were aggressive with the trade. Now, you don't know what's going to happen to the GM because the Wizards are basically, I think, just going to give him the whole franchise to get him there. I don't know what the Wizards are going to do. $10 million, and here you can run the entire operation. And, you know,
he might become the next president in Washington, D.C. I don't know.
You know, like, you know, we'll let you run. We'll get behind you in 2020 for a presidential run. I mean, they're just going to throw everything at him. So if he leaves, you know, maybe that changes things. But Eric, from a basketball standpoint, you just won the title. So where else can you go and find a better fit than what you've got in Toronto? But he's earned the right to do what he wants. If he's a California guy, he just bought a house out there not too long ago. If that's where he wants to go, he has every right to do that. But I think from Toronto's standpoint, they've done everything they could to acquiesce every need that he's had. They let him rest this regular season. He missed 22 games. He only played 60, and then he played the most minutes of anybody in the playoff. So they had a strategy in place. They were willing to work with him. They gave him the best possible situation. I don't know, Eric. Sometimes, like they say, the grass isn't always greener. And if you're having success somewhere and you start to look at the Eastern Conference where the Celtics weren't really a threat and it looks like they're going to lose Kyrie. The Bucks, I think everybody's a free agent outside of Giannis. The Sixers were a mess even with superstars, and they're certainly going to lose, it looks like, Tobias Harris. So the Eastern Conference, if anything, is going to get weaker. And all the talk about Kyrie and KD ending up on one of the New York teams, well, that's not going to happen now either. Even if they're there next year, they're not a threat. So even if he would sign a short-term deal, he's got a chance to go back-to-back with titles in Toronto. And Eric, I think that's the next question I have for you is, with what you saw Kawhi do, in playing only 60 games. Toronto's still the number one seed. And they've seemed to find a formula that really worked, and they just turned him loose in the playoffs, and he did everything for him. We already know that rest is a problem with the NBA, so did this just open Pandora's box when it comes to rest for the rest of the league? Is it going to get worse now somehow?
I think it could. I definitely think it could. I think it's a fascinating point, because when you have guys, especially guys like LeBron and guys, maybe even Steph and Klay, other guys that are getting up in age in their career, they might see this formula, even if it's a rotational thing. If you have a team with maybe two superstars, you go buy a ticket, you might not see both of them on the same night. Maybe LeBron gets 25 games of rest a year, and maybe AD gets 25 games of rest a year. And some, they're just looking at, okay, if we can get to the top 2 or 3 seeds in the playoffs, that's good enough. And then we'll be fully rested for the playoff run. And so you might not see AD or LeBron or, some of these guys in the regular season more than 60 games or 55 games. I do think, and Popovich has been on this for a long time with rotating his players and this quote unquote load management and things like that. If it's working, it always comes down to if it's working, right? No matter what sport you're in, you're looking at strategies if they work or they don't work. And even if it's a bold strategy like this, if it's working, to hell with the business side of it. The coaches don't care about that. They care about getting to the playoffs and winning an NBA championship. The business side of it will take care of itself. And if that's what it takes, I think they're going to try it.
You already know analytics. It's a copycat league. If people start getting some kind of reporting that says this is the strategy to go with, that it keeps players fresher into the playoffs, or something comes out about that, you're right. The teams are going to say, you know what? The hell with our fans. They want us to win. If they're mad about some regular season game, game 23 at home, something like that a star is missing, so be it. Because they're going to be a lot happier when all the stars are in the playoffs. Ticket prices are more expensive. This is a league problem. This is an Adam Silver problem that he's going to have to figure out what to do with this. There's already been talk of, he's even come out and said, maybe the season's too long. Maybe something like 70 games is more the sweet spot that we need. Do you really think the owners are going to want to give up 6 home games? Do you really think that the players are going to want to give up, just under 10%? Or so, a little more than 10% of their games in terms of revenue. So that's going to be 10% or so off of the TV deal. I don't see them wanting to do that, Eric, for money. So I think this is a situation where the players want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to be fully compensated as 82 game a year players, get all that TV revenue, get their contracts and everything like that, and then play whatever games they want. And I don't think that is going to work down the road. The league is generated, it runs on star power. The NFL, people are going to watch that week in, week out, regardless if there's a star or two that are missing, because people just are more interested in the teams. But as a LeBron fan, if you know LeBron is going to be setting out a Thursday night game that's on TNT that's a 10:30 start, how invested are you going to be in that game?
I'm not staying up for it.
You're not staying up for it. You probably don't even care. Okay, maybe you turn it on to see how they look in the first few minutes of the game, but as the game gets on, you're not going to care. So that's the problem that the league is going to have with this, because I agree. I think that people are going to look at this and say, wow, that formula really looked great. Let's start doing that. Let's get our guys rest. No back-to-backs. No more 3 and 5 days, things like that. I think teams are really going to start to look at this, Eric, especially like you said, the stars in this league that are 28, 29, 30 plus years old. I think you're going to see them cut back. You can look at the flip side of it. There's a lot of people blaming how many minutes was on KD. I ranted about that weeks ago on the show, but it's out there where people say, well, he just got pushed too hard in the early series. Too many minutes versus the Clippers. Too many minutes early versus the Rockets. Played 78 games in the regular season. That's what led to the injury. That's the flip side of it that people are going to use as the argument of why the stars shouldn't play. So I think, Eric, this is a huge issue that the league is going to have to look at if this keeps getting worse.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm really torn on it, to be honest with you, because I definitely see your point. I mean, and even from ticket sales, if I'm going to take my sons over to an NBA basketball game in Philly, and I know that Simmons and Embiid are sitting that night, we're probably going to pick a different game. So right. I totally get it. I totally get it. But from a business standpoint, the ownership, the marketing plan is going to be, hey, do you care about a game on December 15th or do you care about one on May 15th?
Right.
So, yeah, boy, it's going to be a tough thing. And I think the benefit, though, that the NBA has, well, maybe benefit, is they need to start spreading these stars around again, like it was in the 80s and 90s, because that way, if you have a night where LeBron is sitting, well, with social media and the way that we get content now, that's okay. You don't have LeBron tonight, but you can turn on TBS or TNT or even NBA TV with the cable package, or even some of your live streams, and you can just flip it to a different team and see one of the other stars. However, if all of the stars are on 3 or 4 teams and then, 23 of the teams aren't relevant, that doesn't work either. So, I do agree that Adam Silver has to look at the broad picture here and say, okay, we need to spread our stars around. We need to protect our TV contracts, protect our teams, but also protect our players, because those are the investment. And that's where it's a double-edged sword, because, on the flip side of that is if you don't have players, or you get a finals like this where one of the juggernaut teams is missing, 90% of their roster, it felt like, what good is that either?
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk about what the world went on with the Warriors, but I have one last question as we finish up the Raptors here. They were celebrating their first title on Monday in Toronto. I don't know why people are shooting at each other up there. I thought they would be happy with Toronto winning a title, but yeah, I don't know what's going on in Canada. But Eric, Canada, they got their first title because of Kawhi. This was a trade that went down. Happy to report here on the Talkback Pod. If you go back, Eric and I were both in favor of Toronto doing this. You go out, you get yourself a star. There was a ton of turnover in the Eastern Conference. LeBron wasn't there anymore. And you get off that DeRozan contract with them. If it didn't work out, you just blow the whole thing up this offseason and you go from there. And it paid off for him. So when you look at this trade now, in the last 20, 25 years of trade, is this the best trade in the NBA?
Boy, I don't know how you could be down on the trade when you deliver an NBA championship. There was a lot of people though, Eric. If you look back at some of the tweets and things that don't age well, there was a lot of takes on this, and people hated this. Oh, why would you give up DeRozan for 1 year? Kawhi's never stand there. Yeah. You're not going to win. And then it pays off. Well, look, if they go out in the first round, or even if Philly ends up beating them and, they don't go deep in the playoffs, and then Kawhi leaves and you're kind of rebuilding, I think you've got a point if you're a Toronto fan where you say, hey, look, you guys, gave up everything and we still didn't win a title. It becomes much harder when that narrative is, well, and I agree with what you said earlier in the show, that as Toronto and as an organization, they did everything they could. I give all the credit in the world to that Raptors organization, because they made Kawhi feel at home. They made this trade work. They gave him all the pieces he needed. They bring in Gasol. They made their playoff run and they did everything they possibly could. Kudos to them. I don't know how you could go any other way, but if Kawhi leaves and then you've got Gasol maybe Gasol opts out then, and you're kind of back to that. Okay, we've got Lowry and we've got some role players, but now we're back to sort of a middle seed team in the East. And then we've got Kyrie moving around. We've got some other things going on with Milwaukee. We've got the Sixers coming up, and then you're back to being 5th seed Toronto again. I don't know how that plays out long term. But again, titles are hard to come by. And now that you delivered one, not every team's going to be a dynasty. Sometimes you winning a title in a decade is a good thing. And Toronto did that. They've now been 23 years or 26 years as an organization, and now they have a title. They're not going to win multiple titles. That just wasn't going to happen anyway. So, maybe if Kawhi stays there, they've got a chance to do that, but there's teams in the West that are just going to keep getting stronger, like the Lakers. So again, I look at it as a success, but I don't know if it can be considered one of the best trades of all time, other than just the fact that it delivered in a 1 year span. It delivered the title, and that's hard to do in the NBA or really any sport. You had 1 year to do it. You did it. I don't think the trade can be anything but a success. But yeah, after this, you're in rebuild mode either way.
Well, I think a lot of people look at the Harden trade of what Houston did. So that's probably lent them more long-term success in the fact that they've been a relevant team in the NBA since they made the trade. But when you're talking about going out and getting a guy and bringing a title to your city, if that's going to be the measure, there's nothing that's even close to this. Because this was the guy that you came in. Look, the Raptors weren't going to win a title this year if they don't make this deal. They got Danny Green in that deal too. And he was one of the 7 guys that they played